All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our STEM Center Learning Community speaker series. We know that some of you are joining from class. We know some of you are here just from the STEM Center. So we're really encouraged to have some special guests today to introduce you to and also to lead us in a conversation. We have three, and we'll let them introduce themselves shortly, but three scientists and researchers from Genentech, and it's part of a global company with lots of missions, but this particular group is studying work related to cancer and related to tumors, and even some of the things involved in identifying those. So we look forward to a really exciting talk, both hearing about their journey, and then they'll also sprinkle some science in as well. So we're also looking to expand our understanding of cancer through their talk today. For the comm students, I'm going to drop in the chat our link to our STEM Learning Community Canvas page. Some of you are already members of that, but some of you are not yet there. Feel free to click into that link, and I'm just going to screen share briefly to show you some of the resources that we have in that Canvas page, and just invite you to be part of our community. So here's our talk for today, our three scientists who are with us, and there will always be a talk where we've been scheduling these monthly, and so we give you lots of opportunities to meet scientists and researchers and be exposed to new disciplines. Here at our kind of cover page, wanted to point out that you can apply to be part of the STEM learning community. There's a little application there, and being part of the community gets you access to resources related to scholarships, related to mentoring, related to tutoring, and even summer research. And all of these are here. We have 4 or 5 students who earned multi-thousand-dollar earning summer internships this summer, doing really authentic hands-on research in fields that kind of will jumpstart their interest in research science. So we encourage you to consider and click onto that link there. I do want to point out, and I'll highlight this again at the end, the College of Marin scholarship deadline is actually this weekend. And these scholarships are available for all comm students. And there are some specifically actually allocated for STEM students and nursing students. So if you fall into that category, I encourage you, take a look, join the learning community, click into the scholarships page. And this Friday from 1 to 2, we're going to have a little scholarship workshop just to talk a little bit more about how to set your application up. So if you're interested, come on by. That Zoom link is there. So I'm going to stop sharing here, and I'm going to turn the stage over again to our 3 distinguished scientists. Perhaps I'll let them introduce themselves, a little background, and then they have a presentation for us that they've kind of worked together to seamlessly bring to us. So thank you again for joining us. I do, we'll frame it this way. We'll highlight them as they speak in their slides, but we'd like to use the chat box as a way to ask questions. And so after their presentation, there will be a way for us to have a kind of a moderated discussion where you can ask questions. And so as things are coming up about their experience, about their struggles, about their successes, about the research, right? Please write those in the chat box. That's our way to keep this conversation going. So without further ado, let's go ahead and turn it over and let's enjoy.
Thanks, Paul. I'm going to introduce myself first and then Robert and Stephanie can introduce when their part of the presentation starts. But I'm Baru Fernando. I work as a biomarker scientist in the oncology biomarker development group at Genentech. I wanted to start by kind of first introducing Genentech. We have, as Paul mentioned, prepared some slides. So let me start off that presentation. Okay. Just to confirm you're seeing it, right? Maybe a thumbs up from, okay,
Yes.
Great. So wanted to first introduce Genentech. These are our founders, Bob Swanson and Herb Boyer. And really, they are, Genentech was founded in 1976 when they met and when Bob actually approached Herb about the potential of using recombinant DNA technology. And Herb at the time was a pioneer in this field. And after that meeting, Genentech was basically born, launching with it the biotechnology industry almost 40 years ago. Genentech is a company of many firsts because of its dedication to pursuing groundbreaking discoveries and developing life-saving medicines. It was the first to produce a human protein and clone human insulin back in the late 70s, in addition to developing the first targeted antibody for cancer. We are now a member of the global Roche organization, and the South San Francisco office shown here is the headquarters for all of Roche in the US, while the Roche headquarters is in Basel, Switzerland. And together with Roche, we are leading the way in personalized healthcare, diagnostics, and pharmaceuticals. So switching gears a little, I wanted to talk a little bit about myself and my journey into the role that I am today. I was actually born in Sri Lanka, which is an island off the coast of India. But we moved to the US when I was 5 years old because my mom was doing a master's degree in Bowling Green, Ohio. So all of the family of five moved and lived with my mom in her small studio apartment for a few months, and didn't know any English, was really struggling. We didn't have a car in the beginning. My mom didn't know what snow days were. I had this distinct memory of walking in the snow to school and the doors being locked because my mom didn't realize that snow days was a thing and schools closed. So that was definitely a challenging beginning, but we somehow made it through. And I always gravitated towards the fields of math and science, just because there was always a right answer, no matter the language, especially in math. So I really enjoy those two subjects. And because of my enjoyment of those math and science and STEM in general, I really thought that, plus I had limited exposure to these other STEM careers. So I thought the only avenue for me to kind of partake in those was kind of the profession of being a physician. And so I really thought that was my only option, unfortunately. So when I wanted to do an undergrad, I decided to, one, stick close to home and go to this small state school in Ohio called Wright State University, mainly for financial reasons, because I had obtained a lot of scholarships and that was the best way to pay for my tuition there. But in Wright State, I majored in biology and pre-med. But during this process, I always thought I wanted to go to med school. I wanted to do some research in a lab because I thought it would help my med school application. But really doing research in a lab just changed my whole career trajectory completely. I had discovered this new world of science, and I really loved the fact that I was making new discoveries, and ultimately realized that this was the first stage in finding cures for disease. And I really enjoyed that I could help patients this way. I could reach more patients this way by making a new discovery versus kind of diagnosing illnesses and prescribing things. And luckily, I had a really great research mentor, Courtney. She was awesome. She was so supportive and really helped me show that a career in science was possible for a woman. And she supported me and pushed me to apply for grad school. So I decided to actually pursue a PhD in pharmacology next in New York City. It was a great experience, but it was so long. It took me, I think, 6 years in total. But this was the first time that I was really challenged. I was, I mentioned I liked science and math in high school and college, but this was the first time that I really found the classes were really challenging, and it was super hard experience trying, because there was no textbook that I could fall back on, right? During the PhD, I was making brand new discoveries that nobody knew anything about. And I was the one leading the way in the lab, doing these experiments. And I couldn't fall back on a textbook to figure out if what I was discovering was right or not. But in the end, it was really a truly great experience. And I made amazing friends. And I also learned a lot about myself and learned how much effort I had and how much effort I could put into something. And it finally paid off. And I found this picture of myself after I defended my PhD. It was in my old department's website here. But after the PhD, I kind of was a little burnt out from the academic way of doing science. I think if you guys ever do a PhD, you'll find that the career track that's really instilled in you is that you have to become a professor and you have to have your own lab. And I really didn't want that for myself. It was just too much stress. It seemed like everybody, had to work on grants, and there was basically no work-life balance, like so little pay. And I didn't want that for myself. And I also felt a little removed from why I started this process in the beginning. I wanted to help patients, and I felt that working, in academia, it was a little bit removed from helping the patients. So at that point, I really turned towards industry, and I decided to look for postdoc positions there. So eventually I found a postdoc position at Genentech, and it was a real hard decision to make that transition from New York to move cross country to San Francisco. But I'm really glad I took that step, because I probably wouldn't be here, obviously. It was definitely a challenge because you were basically had to leave. Me and my husband at the time, we spent 7 years in total in New York City, and moving to a new city where you didn't have any support system. We were also further away from family. That was very challenging, but in the end, it turned out to be a great experience. I joined a postdoc position in the Discovery Oncology group. And here I was really making a lot of progress, understanding, the role of mutations in cancer, and how that affects the protein that is mutated, and how that affects the tumor, and how it was driving tumor growth, basically. So in the end, I understood that my postdoc position is still considered a training position. And I was always thinking, what is my next step after this? And moving to Genentech, I was really able to see what other STEM career pathways were possible. It just seemed like throughout my whole way, I had such a limited view, from the beginning, when I thought in elementary school, like, oh, I like science and math, I have to become a physician. Going to grad school, I was like, oh, okay, I have, this whole research field that I could do, that I could potentially be a part of. And then moving to Genentech, I just saw a huge new industry that was available. There's assay development, there's working in a lab, as I was doing currently in the postdoc, but there was also, fields in business that you could also apply your STEM background. So it was just amazing. And I really took the opportunity to talk to a lot of people in the company and understand what they did, to try to see where my interests lied, and to see if my interests could fit into the position that they were in. And so it was really a great opportunity here. Eventually, I decided that being a biomarker scientist was where I truly had the most interest in. I could apply everything that I had learned in my PhD and postdoc and apply that to real clinical studies where we're able to get samples from patients and look for biomarkers. And I'll explain that a little bit later, but exactly what I do. But I took the time also to make a lot of connections during my interviews with these people at Genentech and their positions. And what I wanted was also for them to remember me, so that if there was a position that came up, that they could forward me that position and I could apply. And that's exactly what happened. It worked out for me in the end. someone forwarded me a position, and I applied, and I did all the hard work, of course, to prep a great presentation and do a great interview. But really, that initial foot in the door, it really helped to have a relationship that was already there. So switching gears a little, I wanted to talk to you about what I do currently, day to day as a biomarker scientist. I basically look at markers in your blood or tissue from your cancer and see if it associates with a better or worse response to a drug. So the whole goal really is to tailor a therapy based on the markers that you or your cancer have. And this is what is considered personalized healthcare. So I work in the development phase of a drug. And just to give you a brief background, there's a very, very long journey in multiple phases from when a chemistry molecule is first made to when it can be a drug that is FDA approved. And there's a lot of research that goes into first identifying what is a good target for a drug. And in cancer, that's generally the thing which might be a mutated protein or a gene that is driving a tumor to grow out of control. And once that's identified, there's a lot of chemistry done to pick compounds that can inhibit that protein. And a lot of experiments are done then to pick the best molecule and make sure it's effective at killing the tumor and it's safe in early animal models. So once it's safe and it's deemed to have a lot of promise, then it can finally enter humans. And this is where exactly I do my work. It's when these molecules first reach human studies is where I do a lot of the biomarker work. So we gather different samples like blood or tissue and identify biomarkers first to see if the drug is working in early stage studies. And then in later stage studies, we can see if certain markers that might predict which patients will respond to the drug. So by looking at biomarkers, we can get the right medicine to the right patients in the end. So that's been my journey thus far into the biomarker scientist career track. And I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. One being, I mentioned the role of the mentors and how much they can influence what you do and how much support they can give. So I think it's really important to make these relationships and maintain these relationships, because you never know when someone might be able to push you to into a newer career track or even get you your next job. And another thing I want to make note of is to really get out of your comfort zone and don't pass up an opportunity. There was a lot of big decisions I had to make along the way. Moving from Ohio to New York was a huge one. Really, I can tell you the first year that we lived in New York was really, really tough. I didn't know anyone. I was super homesick, but in the end, that was the beginning of where I really found myself as a person. And if I didn't get out of my comfort zone, there probably would be no way that would be here today with all of the experience that I've had. And finally, just do what's right for you and choose your own path. I'm just telling you my perspective and my journey along the way, but really this may not be the same path you take, and that's totally fine. Or you may take a really roundabout way to get where we are, or even get to a similar position to what I have. So I think it's really dependent on you. Of course, you're going to be living your life, right? No one else can live it for you. So really do what's right for you and choose your own path would be probably my biggest lesson learned from all of this. Yeah, so Robert, shall I pass it on to you?
Yeah, please. Cheers. Thank you, Taru, for that. Yeah, many thanks. Cheers. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is Robert Clark. I'm a project manager. I am working as Taru in the oncology biomarker development team, but we're a group based here in Basel. As a project manager, I also look after our lab activities in Shanghai, China. So I am kind of stuck between 3 different time zones. But yeah, nice to be here and sharing my journey with you guys. Next slide, please, Taro. So who am I? So I think part of one of the great bits and about STEM in a way, and from my personal space, asking the questions, being inquisitive. So I've always been, growing up, I was born in Jamaica, a tiny island, Caribbean, and always asking questions around how things work, whether it's machinery or electronics or biology systems. I remember even as a young kid, trying to catch frogs and butterflies, lizards, anything that moved. And for me, it was always asking, how does this thing work? How does, life and engineering and science and everything come together? And I think that inquisitive nature kind of moved me into the lab environment where I studied the lab technology at university in Jamaica. And then this was maybe about 25, 30 years ago, I decided, okay, now I needed a sort of a career change. So I decided to migrate to the United Kingdom. So I moved to London, where I took that interest in science and asking questions and, the whole how biological systems work into a career in nursing. So I actually decided to switch career paths and moved into a career in cardiovascular nursing, where I had the opportunity not only study in the UK, but also completed my residency at the London Health Sciences Centre in Ontario, Canada. So about 7 years ago again, I decided, okay, now I'm ready for my next challenge. So I actually moved from our UK offices over to Basel, Switzerland, where I've been based for the last 7 years. So just really a journey from starting, how things work into really the mechanics, the engineering aspects, the scientific aspects. And, really that has really set me up for, I think for me, a really super exciting career in STEM and as a project manager that I work in now. Next slide, please, Taro. So I think, thanks, Sarah. One of the main, things for me was, again, growing up on a small island in the Caribbean. I always dreamt about the big wide world and travel. And, I was always, looking at maps and, looking at the Discovery Channels or National Geographic and really wanted to see the world. And I've been quite lucky and quite fortunate to be given that opportunity to be able to move right across the world in the job that I've done. And as I said earlier, from moving from a small island in the Caribbean to Europe, being able to travel south, east, north, right across the world. So I think for me that's really been a great opportunity that I've really enjoyed. And as Taro also mentioned about moving out of your comfort zone and moving to a different place, a different culture, different totally in Europe. I don't know if you guys probably saw the movie Cool Runnings, where the Jamaican bobsled team decided to take part into the Winter Olympics. That for me was kind of the first real taste of winter. That coming from a tropical island into minus 10 degrees in snow. That took some adjusting to do, but again, I really enjoyed it and moving and expanded my cultural as well as my knowledge insights. Next slide, please, Taro. I think one of the main reasons when we started speaking with Paul and the team there at Marine College was really to discuss with you guys some of our personal challenges, opportunities that we have kind of had to face, through life to get to where we are now in our current positions. And for me, socioeconomics was a big part of it. I'm number 4 of 7 kids. So my single parent, my mom didn't have a lot. So we had to kind of we had a sort, we're okay in terms of, she made sure that we went to school. We had the wherewithal to really focus on learning, because that for her was a big part of it. So it was really for us, in terms of getting that opportunity, really looking at, okay, being from sort of a disadvantaged background, but really trying to look at what are some of the how I can really use my current inquisitive nature, knowledge, and to really push ahead and through that the socioeconomic hurdle. Lack of availability against, this was maybe going back 30 years ago, where the internet wasn't widely available, and getting to the library, you go and trying to get a book, we didn't have access to Google or any sort of online resources. So it was just spending hours and hours in the library. Again, as I said, geographical. It's a small island I grew up with in Jamaica, and just access to just really reaching out to get information that you needed around, even going to university or colleges. Was really really difficult. And as I said, I've spent many hours, days, sometimes in the library, just trying to get books or trying to get access to paper resources. So again, it's a far cry from today, where everybody has access to the internet. Most people have access to the internet or Google, which makes it a lot easier. In terms of opportunities, I would say that definitely having someone that I looked up to, or a role model, really helped me to look at what that person had done. I remember at a very good friend of mine, his father was a physician, a doctor, and we were kind of really in the sort of the same, started from the same level, but I always looked at his dad and thinking, wow, his dad managed to really, through all the challenges and setbacks, was really able to achieve his goal and his dream of studying medicine. Travel, again, I was quite lucky to be given that opportunity to be able to travel and to really expand my mind, because I think that for me was really a great way of seeing the world, seeing other cultures, meeting other people. That for me was really a great opportunity that I had. I've also listed family and friends, of course, a support network that I had around me, close family, close friends. And some of those days when sometimes I just didn't feel like going on, or you kind of just thinking, I can't be bothered with going back to the library again, or repeating this experiment again or something, then it was always that encouraging word from either a close family or close friend to say, hey, listen, keep going, look at it. And here I've highlighted hard work. I know it's a little bit of a cliche, but I would also say not only working hard, but also working smart in terms of, trying to maximize, be as efficient as you can with time. And as a project manager, that is always something that, for me, time has always been sort of, one of my biggest resources. I plan my day down to, if I can, the every 5 minutes, but it's also always important to just be smart in terms of what you're looking at, where you are now, how much you put in to get the maximum efficiency, effectiveness, and productivity out of your day. Again, focus, just the belief and the passion, and being daring to dream, daring to think big, daring to think differently, not just looking at the circumstances that you're in today, but where you want to be in 5-10 years time, and you're really looking ahead and putting in that hard work and that belief in yourself, just to be able, wanting to get to that end goal, really. So that for me was really something that really drove me through those times when I was really struggling, even going through school or socioeconomics or challenges. Well, really just the belief and the passion that I had the ability to push myself hard and to make it. Next slide, please, Taru. So my work today, Taru touched a little bit on clinical research projects. I'm project manager by trade, and what we're doing, we're in the business of making cancer drugs, therapies for people to cure, try and do that all the aim to improve their well-being, their lives, try and cure cancer. I think that is for us as scientists and as researchers and operations managers in Roche-Genentech to really look at how we can really treat this illness. And through the different stages, of course, because we're dealing with human lives and human beings, it's a really rigorous process that the drug has to be tested to be safe, and it has to be confirmed in terms of the dosing, that it's effective in a larger population groups, and then even at the later stage when the drug is on the shelf, when you go into your pharmacy or your chemist, there is also still a lot of research that goes on just to make sure that the drug is, there are no adverse events or, it's compliance, etc. So it's really a very long journey that we are engaged in. And on the next slide, please, Taru. Here as a project manager and project management and how that ties into the sort of the early stage of trying to identify a molecule that could potentially, have really treat a cancer target, into really getting that product into the supermarket or into the pharmacy. The whole project life cycle that begins really with planning, ensuring that you have the correct resources, implementing your project, you evaluate, ensure that your project is going well, monitor, ensure that you have the control processes in place. And this is really a core part of project management in making a drug, making sure that a drug is safe. You have so many different people involved in not only a scientist, but you also have the data management individual. You have people from clinical operations that ensure that the trial is run safely. And also, of course, my skill set in project management, just to ensure that we have all our activities, well aligned, that we are able to bring this product or this drug to market quickly. Next slide, please, Taro. So my typical daily job or day-to-day job, it's really around tracking milestones, looking at contracts or budgets, team meetings. We work in a global team, so right across the world, whether it's engaging with my colleagues in Shanghai or my colleagues in San Francisco or in Europe, in Brazil, in wherever. So we work in really large global teams, and getting everybody together in the same, whether it's virtually in sometimes pre-COVID, we had also to do a lot of face-to-face meetings, but now even virtually to get people from across the world together can also be quite challenging. So that's a core part of my task as well. Ensure that effective communication is going on. Everybody knows what's happening. Every project has a risk, and to ensure that that is tracked as well as at the end of the project, to make sure that we look at lessons learned, because unfortunately not every project is successful, but if it fails, then we have to go back and ask why and, how we can do things better next time. Next slide, please, Taru. So why choose STEM as a career pathway? I remember back, even going back to high school or university when I first started out, I had a lot of friends who were in business or they were kind of looking the MBAs or doing their business pathway, and so all the science guys are all geeks. But right now, to be honest, with everything that's going on with the COVID pandemic, I think everybody's coming to realize that science is actually cool, and scientists are really leading the fight against this virus, right? So it's a good feeling proud to be in a community of scientists and everybody trying to tackle such a public health emergency as COVID-19. It's really looking and trying to change and tackle some of the toughest challenges right now facing humanity. I've put here that there's been many studies, a lot of data around that showing that healthcare is a recession-proof industry in terms of job satisfaction, but also job stability. So this is a really cool place and cool time to be in STEM and science. Next slide, please, Saru. And I think this is my last slide there. And yeah, my top tips really just really focus on your path, the career path in STEM. Speak to your local mentor, your school science team. Asking the right questions as well, being inquisitive, be research-minded, and also importantly, what do I need to qualify? What do I need to get to that end goal? And that's as well something that the school science team and teachers or tutors will be able to advise. And yeah, have fun, along the way. You have the challenges, but also be able to have fun, have some downtime, and really enjoy the work that you do. And I think that's my last slide, Taru, really. Cheers, thank you.
All right, thanks, Robert. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Hills, and I'm an associate scientist, also in oncology biomarker development at Genentech. I currently live in Marin, specifically in San Rafael, with my partner and my dog. See them on the right-hand side. And I am originally from Fairview, which is a very small town in North Texas that had a population of about 1,000 when I was growing up. Being from this rural community, there weren't really any scientists or PhDs that I got to know growing up. So I never really considered this as a career option. Around this area, things like agriculture and working with livestock were more common. And my parents, my father had been working the same job that he had had since he was 15 in a hardware store. He never graduated from college. And my mom was the first in her family to graduate, and she was a local elementary school teacher. So it really took just through luck in high school, as I was getting to take classes in biology and interact with our high school. We didn't have a high school in the town where I grew up, so I went to a high school in a slightly larger town nearby, and I got to meet people there who came from families that were more in tech or science, different backgrounds. And it was really through a combination of a couple of teachers and also getting to know the parents of my friends and getting to learn about these alternative careers that I even started considering working in science and being interested in it. And so from that origin in rural Texas, I never imagined, as you see on the right, that I would eventually go on to get a PhD and become the first both PhD and scientist in my family. The next slide, please. Thank you. So why did I end up going into science, and why am I grateful that I went into science? So when I was very young, you can see on the upper far left, my mom was battling breast cancer. She had stage 4 breast cancer, and she was very sick for a number of years, kind of in and out of the hospital. This is her actually coming home from the hospital after she was engaged in an experimental treatment, back then a bone marrow transplant. And she wanted to be home for my birthday because she was worried that it may be one of the last that she could spend with me. So I grew up seeing her participating in these clinical trials. She ultimately ended up winning the battle against breast cancer. And I got to have a mom growing up. And so I saw how important and impactful science could be. So I really, that's one of the things that I love most about it, is it really gives you the chance to do something for other people and for the planet. It also, I think, is an area where I've grown a lot personally through it. You learn to think like a scientist, and this really is a way of thinking that is using information and weighing it to make decisions. And I use this not only in my work, but even in my personal life on how to make decisions about things that I choose to pursue or do. I also enjoy the knowledge. I've always been, like Robert, fascinated with the natural world. And so I really love learning how things work and understanding not just things outside of us, but even ourselves and how do our own bodies work. And finally, you can see through all the pictures on the bottom, I've just had amazing experiences. I think science, you get to work with people from around the world. You get to learn a lot about some just really interesting things, and yeah, just feel like you're part of a global community, which I love. All right, next slide, please. So how did I end up becoming a scientist? What were the steps that I took? So in high school, as I mentioned, I had some very helpful teachers who, one of them took us to a cancer research seminar where I got to see how science could help support cancer therapies. This got me interested in it, and I happened to have a friend whose parents were encouraging her. She was thinking about going to med school. They encouraged her to start doing summer internships in labs. And so I asked her if I could come along. I actually rode the bus all the way from our small town into into the big city of Dallas. Oh, I apologize, I have a barking dog. And ended up doing my first summer internship. And this was an incredibly positive experience. I got the chance to see how fun science could be. This led to me majoring in molecular biology in college. And during that time, I faced a struggle for me, which was coming from a background that didn't really emphasize higher education. I was much more comfortable doing projects. I wasn't very taking classes, memorizing a bunch of things wasn't really something that I found as interesting as just getting involved in something and learning as I went. And so I think something that I took away from my college experience was that there are, as I've moved on in life since then, I realized that that's just one tiny part of doing great science, that you also need other skills such as curiosity, teamwork, resilience, and practical experience. And so one of the lessons is for me, just remember a lot of times certain things you do are just getting your foot in the door, getting a certain experience to move on to the next step. And that if there's a particular area that you just kind of need to get on to the next step, that you can find things later on that really tap into your strengths and that take advantage of other skills or talents you might have, that basically academic skills are not the only thing you need to become a good scientist. I had also chosen to go specifically to Trinity University, where I went to school, because of financial reasons. I went there because they offered a full scholarship. And it was also one of the first times where I was around people from a different socioeconomic background. So I think that was also a challenge that I think can be a difficult experience to have, and one in which you just have to focus on why I was there and what I wanted to get out of the experience. I then went on, I got to do an internship through a really neat US Department of State program. They take care of everything, and I went to Germany with this and did cancer research, or sorry, I did RNA biology research over in Germany for a year. And this is another neat opportunity through science. You can get the chance to work in different countries, which is neat. And finally, I did my PhD at Cornell University, followed by a postdoc in cancer biology, which is the area that I work in now. I finished that postdoc last October and just started at Genentech just this past year. And one of the things I also wanted to point out on the left, as you can see on from 2003 through 2010, I have a pipette. That's often thought to be the typical tool of a scientist working in the lab. But I actually found a lot of science is done on the computer, which is kind of neat, and that there's kind of there are many diverse sides of science and the work you can do. And so I've been working more, you can think of me as more of like a programmer. They call us computational biologists or bioinformaticians since 2010. So just pointing out that there are different ways that we can do science. Most important, I just wanted to point out, you do not need a PhD to work in science, and that there are something that I've learned as I've gone along. There are so many wonderful positions for holders of BS degrees, MS degrees, all sorts of other degrees as well. And a couple other, I already mentioned one of these, that there's more outside of academic success to becoming a great scientist, but also I've found that it really helps. You can see I did internships and things like this. It helps to get these experiences. It helps to tell people what you're interested in. Just try to talk to and meet as many people as you can and ask them if they know people working in that area. So you can think of it as, you may not know anyone in your immediate circle, but if you just start talking to people, they can start connecting you, and eventually you will. I found that I typically eventually do find somebody who can help connect me with an experience. And then really just looking for those opportunities can help, because where I started out in life, I really had no idea these opportunities were available. And it was just through taking, as both Daru and Robert have also pointed out, just trying a new experience. It opens your world a little more, and then that gives you more options to step forward, make a new choice, take a new opportunity, and you keep building out what you know about the world and the opportunities that you have available to you. All right, next slide, please. And so I wanted to conclude this part about my own journey with just a little bit more about what I do at Genentech. And I saw in the chat that already people were interested in learning a little bit more about biomarkers. So I'll try to touch on that a little bit as I go through this. My work at Genentech really focuses on helping to match the right patient with the right drug. I have a little schematic here of how we go from an idea to the end result of a new medicine for patients. And we usually start off when someone has an idea about what might make a good drug, or even we call them like a hypothesis, something that we think might be occurring that we want to test. We start with research. This can take many, many years. And eventually through the research, we get to a candidate drug. And once there's a candidate drug or molecule, then it goes through development. And in this development, it's figuring out, the safety of the drug and better understanding how it works. And then eventually, and this is I work in between the development and clinical trial spaces. It eventually goes to clinical trials, which is where, as Tharu mentioned, the drug starts being tested in patients. And then it has to go through many clinical trials. And at the very end of that, it can finally be approved. And my work specifically, bridging developmental and clinical trials, is trying to better understand what patients would benefit the most from a drug. So the problem is that not all people's cancers respond the same to a cancer drug. And even within a certain cancer type, such as, for example, lung or breast cancer, there can be differences in tumors across patients. And so my goal is to identify characteristics of a cancer. We call them biomarkers, just something unique about that cancer. It could even be about the person as well, that predicts how well that particular person and or disease will respond to a drug. And I specifically, as I mentioned, use computers. And I thought, if we have time, I know we're kind of running out of time. I can give a quick example of a biomarker, or we can move into Q&A. Yeah, okay, thank you, Daru. This is just a quick example of a biomarker that's commonly used in cancer. So certain cancer drugs, they're called immunotherapy drugs, help our immune system distinguish cancer cells from other healthy cells. So it can actually tell them apart in some cases, and it can get rid of the cancer. one of the features that makes cancer cells different from healthy cells are they have mutations in their DNA. And so scientists, including scientists at Genentech, have actually found that immunotherapy drugs sometimes work better for patients whose tumors have more mutations. And this can kind of make sense. You think about it, more mutations in the DNA. If you think about the connection between DNA making then proteins, you have proteins that look different than your normal proteins. And so these stand out, they make the cell look different. And so once we've identified a biomarker like this, in this case, lots of mutations or more mutations, eventually the impact down below are things like this can then be used, the Food and Drug Administration can approve it then to be a diagnostic to help identify patients that have more mutations are more likely to benefit for and then maybe should be prioritized for getting a certain drug. So that's kind of how a biomarker, an example of a biomarker and how it would work. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much. Oh, and I guess I'll give a couple, just a quick intro into some opportunities that we have available at Genentech for you to get some practical experience. So we have two main programs. One is an intern program and the other is a rotation program. Intern programs, the big difference between them and rotation is they're shorter. They're just usually a couple months in the summer. You're working on usually one project and you're getting to benefit from learning from people at Genentech, being part of the community there. Our next slide, please. Thanks. The rotation program is longer. It's 2 years and you do 4 6-month rotations for this. So you just get more time to build relationships and to take part in many different projects for these. Next slide, please. And both of these programs, they pay a stipend. You will get to take advantage of many of the great benefits at being at Genentech, especially once we're back in person on campus. Like for example, fitness club, they have career coaching, etc. And then finally to end with, oh, that's fine. We can go to the next one. Yeah. To end with, these are just a summary. So the internships, you just would look on our website to find more information for. And then this is information about the rotation programs. The one on the right is the one probably most similar to like a experience doing science. And then the others are kind of other areas of drug development. And most important out of anything that I've said about internship and rotation programs is that email address on the bottom. That's for a talent acquisition team member. And they are very happy. You do not have to be wanting to apply now. They're very happy to hear from you, even if you're just interested in. Feel free to reach out to them with any questions that you have, or even just to learn more, let them know that you might be interested at some point in doing an internship. And you can do these, you don't have to do them right now. They can be something that you plan for and do in the future as well. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Taru, Robert, and Stephanie. That was a very well put together, comprehensive presentation, just walking us through so many different opportunities to enter into this. It became exciting as I was listening to this exciting world of cancer and drug development research. As the talk was going on, the chat definitely was exploding. I think we have way more questions than we're actually going to be able to fully answer, but I'm just going to bring out a few of them, and some of them kind of lump together some of the student comments. I'm going to start maybe with Yoshi's comment about recognizing that there was medical research was important, but there's also a global component to keep our environment safe. And related to that, Teresa asked if there's any thoughts regarding intellectual property rights waivers for COVID vaccines and how that may impact research in the future. So there's a desperate global need for vaccine access, and then there's also the development of vaccines, and where does that kind of intersection sit? I wonder if any of our panelists could comment on that.
So yeah, maybe I could jump in on that one, Paul, because yeah, this is a very interesting this question that also came up here in the UK. As you guys have probably heard that one of the companies making the COVID vaccine, AstraZeneca, one of the the contract they have signed with the Oxford scientists that actually developed that particular vaccine was to develop the drug at basically at a really basic, a really low cost, at no cost to not to make profit from the drug. So which is one of the really the stipulations for the Oxford team when they approach AstraZeneca and to partnership with making that drug. And the question around IP rights and in terms of really this work, the industry, of course, in this really extraordinary time of not making profit, right, from people's illnesses. And I know sometimes this has been a kind of how should I say, it seems, that, okay, big drug pharma just making money, but really, IP, of course, drug development or research and development, it's costs a lot, it's very expensive. But in times like these, then this really takes a concerted effort from not everyone, not only the industry, but governments, but civic society, really to come together, because ultimately we are not safe until we are all safe. And I think that for me was a really great thing for AstraZeneca as a global pharma company to do, to really try and restore public faith a little bit. So IP aside, this was kind of extraordinary time that really for them to step up. I think it's the impact will be felt not only now, but really in many years to come, in terms of just really this company not profiteering from something like this. But this is definitely a discussion that the industry, as along with government and civic societies, is definitely starting to have more and more. So very, very good question.
Maybe I can switch gears. Thank you for that answer, Robert. There's a really good question here just about your all's experience of resilience. Does any of you have a specific experiment or a project that actually failed? And how did you bounce back from that failure? That'd be encouraging for us to hear.
Yeah, I can go first. I mean, I think if you decide to pursue a profession in science and work in a lab, you have to encounter many, many, many instances where your experiment will fail. And that in itself is actually quite a challenge to personally encounter continuously, that something doesn't work or you didn't do something right, or even if you did everything right, things could still fail just because your hypothesis may be flawed or the experiment that you're doing is not necessarily addressing what you wanted to in the first place. So it's kind of this learning process as you go on. So I think while I have several experiments that failed, I think I want to point out that just being in science in general, you have to be resilient and you have to realize that you can't take these experiments personally. And you just have to somehow put it aside and continue to move forward. I can think of one where, I was planning a large mouse experiment, and unfortunately we did this, it was a kind of a bone marrow transplant in mice. And unfortunately, it just didn't work. And we used a lot of mice. So I felt like a personal, I just felt so bad that all these mice have to be sacrificed for my experiment, and it didn't work. And it was just devastating to me. And, we looked back, you try and address all the wrong things that you may have not planned for in the beginning. And so you just have to kind of repeat, just try again. And I honestly think all of the whole scientific experience is just try again and keep working, keep your head down, and try to get through it. There is always a light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And Stephanie or Robert want to chime in on that one as well?
I can share. I had a challenge in my postdoc. I had worked hard during my PhD, gotten to do a postdoc at UCSF in an area I was really excited about, and I was really planning on making a lot of progress. And one of my parents got sick with cancer, a second time. And I ended up having to take a lot of time off to take care of them. This was very hard for me because I wasn't able to do the work that I was basically in training to do. I was thinking I had put in all this time to become a scientist, and now maybe I'm not going to get that path. Of course, at the time I wasn't thinking about this at all. It was only afterwards, when I came back to work after this period of taking time away from work to care for them, that I was, later on trying to get my career moving again. And so it wasn't so much a failure in the experiments themselves, but just not being able to do the work and feeling like I failed because I hadn't done my job. I hadn't gotten the work done that I had originally thought I was going to be doing. And for that, it really helped me just to reach out to people, because you realize other people have gone through these difficult experiences as well. And just to give yourself time, understand that there'll be periods where, you just may not make as much progress in an area as you think you will, and that you can always start where you are again and move forward from there. So that was probably the most difficult thing that I had faced in my career journey. And even that I was able to recover from and kind of find a new trajectory afterwards.
Correct there as well, Stephanie. I agree that the resilience is a key part of being in science and being in the industry that we work in. And a lot of, I mentioned earlier about the complexities of drug development, not only identifying a molecule or a target that, could cure an illness, but to take that drug from the really early lab stages of pipetting and petri dish through to the phases of, testing on small patient numbers to larger patient populations to commercializing. You're talking, 6, 7, 8 years, and the risk of failure is very, very high. So it's something, actually a lot of our work in drug development actually doesn't make it. And, the failure, the resilience to try again, keep trying and keep asking the questions, keep knocking on the doors. That's kind of one of the exciting parts of what's, science itself. It's really never giving up and, really keeping going when, you think, oh, what else can I try? And, that resilience is kind of almost, it comes part and parcel of the job that we do. But it's really just keep going, no matter what, just really keep knocking, and you will be successful.
Thank you for those answers, all three of you. I have a question in here that I feel like is maybe one that many of us are exposed to. It's a comment that my extended family is very holistic and tries to stay away from antibiotics and drugs. And in this current age, you could even add vaccine, right? There's that kind of consideration about medicine. So this question asks, can people cure themselves through natural remedies, or does it just depend on the disease or type of cancer? And I think there's some answer related to maybe biomarkers in there as well. I know that's kind of a broad statement. I wonder if there's maybe a specific example of a cancer that's been identified or a tumor that's been identified and how the drug development led to that particular solution.
Sure. I mean, I can try to, I feel like it's a little bit of a loaded question. So feel free for Stephanie and Robert to join to comment as well. But I personally, in my opinion, I don't know that a holistic approach can always work, especially in late stage cancers. I mean, just in my training, I value the Western medicine so much because I know it's evidence-based. And I think a lot of, with all these natural remedies, I just think some of the data is not there. It's just anecdotal evidence, a story you hear, some misinformation you read online, and you have to really be careful about how you interpret this data, any of these stories, just because, if someone said, oh, I took this herb or drank this cocktail, my cancer went away. They might be not alluding to, but maybe a medical treatment they received, or it just went away. I personally haven't heard of anything working, to be honest, but I don't share that view that natural remedies are a cure for disease. It might alleviate, symptoms like, if it increases your appetite and you're suffering from like nausea or GI symptoms from taking a lot of chemotherapy for cancer, certainly that can, if it alleviates symptoms and it doesn't alter with the medicine that you're currently taking and is supposed to be treating your cancer, of course, take that. But, you have to really consult with your doctor about taking these natural remedies and things you find, because they are not FDA approved, right? And sometimes you just can't be sure what's in those types of things. Like this whole supplement industry is completely unregulated. So we definitely advise against this approach.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us stop there, Thorough. But yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you made a really
trust science.
Fantastic point. Evidence-based. This is why we do research, evidence-based. And you're correct. I mean, a lot of the sort of holistic therapies, of course, they have been practiced from generations in many cultures. They're really, there's a heavy focus, but in terms of the data and in terms of the evidence and to show the reproducibility that an experiment works over and over and over again. And to have not only scientists from one part of the world looking at your data, but all over the world picking it apart and critiquing and finding faults, or to have that really strong scientific basis of the experiment that this drug works, this molecule works, and having that information being made public rather than it being anecdotal or someone says something, but it has to be tested and tested and tested. And, I think the holistic medicine has a place, as I say, in many cultures, in many communities, but there's also a place, for the hard science and the hard evidence. And in some ways, can they work together? Maybe, I mean, as a clinician, as a nurse, having trained, in the hospitals, and, I've treated patients or, really ill from, again, having gone down the route of, holistic medicine, but then they're ended up in a hospital in the worst condition that they were in before, that have had to, really work very hard to save their lives. So there's just a balance there. And as Taru mentioned, just have a chat with someone you trust, your doctor or your GP, or in fact, that can really give you some better information for you to make the right decisions, right?
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, I could just chime in quickly too, as just say, echoing what Robert and Thoreau were saying, that it's really maybe not so much holistic versus science, but just doing the science. If you are going to use holistic remedies, advocating, and this is an area that they're pushing for, is advocating for science, because it's not that scientific approaches don't support or deny it. There just hasn't been a lot of science done. So if something is supported by science, it doesn't matter if it's traditional Western medicine or holistic. It's just that a lot of these areas, unfortunately, in holistic remedies haven't had the science done. And they're slowly, I think, seeing benefits to certain things like the practice of meditation, or, eating a healthier, well-balanced diet. But there's just so far, there needs to be more work done to see if it's evidence-based or not.
And Dr. Daubermeyer, if I could just interject, I think that what Lady just said is extremely important, because there's a lot of suspicion about vaccines and medicine in general, and some people are foregoing it. So having discussions like this with trained professionals who are credentialed in the area, I think it's important to have critical thinking around medical issues, so that you don't actually make your situation worse due to, quite frankly, taboos. A lot of things are taboo. And so these discussions actually can save someone's life just coming in contact with this kind of information. It's very critical that we're exposed to people who do know what it is, but then give us resources where we can check and maybe discuss it with those that we know and love. because some folks, it's just taboo. They just don't believe in it, but they could die. So it's very serious.
I would also say, if I may, Dawn, that I taught in the Virgin Islands, and there is a lot of culture. It's embedded in the culture. It's not just a taboo, where people are skeptical about anything science, so to speak. I mean, I had to engage adults in the understanding of the universe, right, and stars. And it's not that because they don't know, it's been the growing up. It's part of their embedded culture. So I think there is also the importance of being respectful of where they come from and trying to find the middle ground.
Yeah, I appreciate all three answers from our panelists, plus these follow-up comments. There really is something to looking at data and looking at evidence, and even to recognize that the scientific process is a process, and it goes through multiple steps and multiple dozens, hundreds, thousands of pairs of eyes. And I appreciate Robert's perspective there. The more eyes that you have on it, the more robust you trust the outcome once it's gone through to the other side. And I believe our country is in that kind, actually the whole earth right now, right? In terms of this matter of everyone being vaccinated. We're examining that, and the more eyes that this we see the data, the more we need to encourage others and speak in this kind of a way. So these kind of questions are really the intersection. We understand this is where life is, right? This is what you're grappling with. You may be the first one in your household to bring this kind of idea back. Start that conversation. And I see the final comment here. We're going to have to wrap up, unfortunately. I think we could keep going, but recognize. Yeah, go ahead, Nina.
Yeah, so I just want to have a quick question to Stephanie, because Stephanie, you have slides about the possible internships at Genentech. Yeah. We already have a previous conversation, and all the ones that you show us have some interesting requirements, which is the bachelor or so. And I just want to touch upon, because that's the motivation of our possible collaboration, is that do you envision, or maybe you already have, opportunities for students that are in their career, so pre-bachelor of science, that our students at College of Marine can actually take advantage of either soon or in the near future? Can you say a few words about that?
Sure, yeah. So the BS requirements are for our rotation programs. However, internships do not have this requirement. And actually the bulk of our interns are there for the summer. They're summer students and they're from undergrad. So that would be more, internships would probably be the opportunity that would fit better now. And then the rotation program could be something in the future, maybe a couple years down the road if you end up, doing eventually a BS degree. So that's how I kind of see the two opportunities being internship now, rotation potentially later.
And how our students or us as a faculty can, contact, Genentech, or what is the channel usually?
Yep. So that email address that I provided at the end of the slide, maybe that could be sent out to, in a follow-up email to students. Just reach out to them and talk there on the talent acquisition team. So they'll be very interested in just talking, hearing more about your background, and, just interested to know what you're interested in so they can help connect you with those opportunities. From what I understand, the opportunities are posted also on the Genentech website. So if you search for Genentech internships, they usually are posted in, I believe, the fall, and you apply usually by, I think, probably winter at the latest for a summer internship. So just know that you're actually at a good time now. You can start looking this coming fall for those opportunities if you're interested for next summer.
Thank you. That was the perfect answer for us. So we're going to drop our link for our STEM learning community back in the chat for our College of Marin students. Be sure to join. That's where all of this information will be supplied to you. We'll make sure this talk is uploaded, a YouTube link. We'll make sure that internship link becomes available to you. And as is mentioned in the chat, there are ongoing conversations how to create opportunities for our comms students, specifically with Genentech here in South SF, to bring summer internships to you all. So I think with that, we're going to go ahead and end our conversation. Again, a big thank you to our panelists, Tharu Fernando, Robert Clark, and Stephanie Hiltz for your wonderful presentations today. It's been eye-opening, it's been encouraging, And we look forward to more such conversations with you and your colleagues.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, guys. Happy to share.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.